Hello, I'm Ashley Thomas and welcome to my channel, and here's my very late review again of Solo: A Star Wars Story, directed by Ron Howard. First of all, I want to really give some praise to Alden Ehrenreich as Han Solo. Alden Ehrenreich as Solo was amazing. I loved what he did. He nailed the character, he nailed the personality. Even when it comes down to the mannerisms, the slight winks and the nods and the smiles, he captured the soul of Solo. And I just thought Alden Ehrenreich was a great decision. He was a great choice, and he knocked it out the park for me. I thought he was amazing. He was brilliant. And I felt like he made it his own. I've noticed a lot of people I've sort of said that his performance, he sort of disappeared into the background a little bit when you had characters such as Lando, played brilliantly by Donald Glover. I never felt like he sort of disappeared into the background when you had all these other characters, these other actors on the screen with him, sharing the moment, sharing the screen. I never once thought that he sort of disappeared. Maybe that's just me. But that is my opinion. I thought he shined. I thought he was great, and I just liked what he did. Felt very real. His performance felt very natural. It didn't feel forced. It didn't feel like he was trying to be like Harrison Ford. It all felt very natural, and it was great. So I've mentioned Donald Glover. Let's mention him again. He was amazing as Lando. The only downside to Lando in this movie was we didn't really get enough of Lando. I did want a little bit more of him. But what Donald Glover did, like Alden Ehrenreich, he captured the soul of Lando, Donald Glover. And the personalities, the mannerisms, and he became Lando, but he made it his own as well. It didn't feel forced. It didn't come across like he was trying to be Billy D. Williams. He made it his own. And yeah, I thought he was funny. There was a moment in the film in particular where there's a fire involved on the Falcon, and they're trying to dout this fire with one of his cloaks, and he just says, don't, that's limited edition, and it just really made me chuckle. And that leads me into the humour of this film. I liked the humour in this movie. I didn't so much like the humour in The Last Jedi because it felt very Marvel. It was Marvel humour in The Last Jedi. But Solo had that classic Star Wars humour from the original trilogy. They captured that classic humour from those movies, and I loved it. There were a lot of sort of really there were a lot of moments when it comes to the humour that reminded me of Empire Strikes Back, and so yeah. And I think I'm one of those very few Star Wars fans out there that watch Solo that actually really like the character of L3, Lando's droid. I loved her. I thought she was great. She made me laugh. I loved everything the character or this droid stood for, about equal rights and all of that. And I could see why some people thought it got a bit too much, but I liked it. It was just right for me. And I just loved that relationship between the droid L3 and Lando. And Paul Bettany as the villain, Dryden Ross. I loved what he did with the villain, but like Lando, I don't think we really got enough of him. I wanted a little bit more, especially with the performance that we had from Paul Bettany. I mean, he really knows how to play a villain. And he comes across as this really sort of snaky, unpredictable kind of villain. And I just liked what he did with the character. I like how he brought him to life on the screen. It's just a shame we didn't get to see a little bit more of him. I did want a bit more of his character, especially with the fact that his performance was so good. So one of my biggest worries with this movie was that change in directors, all the trouble behind the scenes, and I was sort of afraid of how consistent this movie would be, how consistent the ride would be. Would there be obvious signs of differences in tone? No, there isn't. I was actually quite surprised on how this movie you would never have thought what had gone on behind the scenes had actually gone on. You would never have thought that they'd, got rid of these directors. I think they'd almost finished filming it, I think, and then just brought Ron Howard in to basically reshoot about 80% of the movie. It doesn't come across like that. It all felt and looked like one vision, one director's vision. And so yeah, I was happy, and I think Ron Howard did a great job. I think he crafted a very good movie. I loved what he did with it. It felt real. It felt gritty. This is probably one of the most real feeling Star Wars movies, along with Rogue One. It just feels real. It feels like this, that that people are living in this universe and it's being lived in, and that's what the original trilogy managed to capture. That sort of feeling of the fact that there are actually real people living in this universe, and it felt like it'd been lived in. And Ron Howard managed to capture that feeling with this movie, that grittiness, and that realism. It felt real, and you had all the sort of practical sets as well, and there were a lot of aliens. Puppet aliens, especially during the first act. It's I thought it was a great scene. I loved the first act in this movie, the first action scene, the chase scene. I loved it. It looked real. Everything felt and looked real. And they only from what I could see, they only used CGI when they really needed to, and I really liked that. There's a moment where Han Solo meets Lady Proxima during the first act, and she's this sort of big puppet, and I just loved it because it sort of shot me back to when I was a child watching the original trilogy again. And I just think when it comes to practical effects and puppets and all of that, it just looks so much better than CGI. I think today CGI is overused, and this movie is a good example of how I think you should use CGI. They used it when they really needed to use it. So yeah, I really appreciated when it came to the sort of the practical effects and them actually being on a real set, not on on a blue screen set or a green screen set. I really appreciated that because it just makes the film feel even more real, and it just immerses you more. I think it really does immerse you more into this universe. And this movie, what I really liked about this film was it felt like a gritty western. That's exactly what I wanted a Solo film to be like, to feel like, to look like. When they first announced Solo, I mean, I was one of those fans that were like, do we really need a Solo film? But you know what? I'm up for it anyway because I absolutely adore Star Wars. But one of those things that I really wanted them to do with it was sort of capture that sort of grittiness and western sort of feel. And they achieved that. Ron Howard achieved that. And that's one of the aspects of this movie that I really like. It feels like a western. And there's a moment during the third act. It's in all the trailers. And it's almost like a gunslinger moment. And just the way that scene plays out. The tension in that scene. The way the scene was shot. I had a big smile on my face. Because I was thinking, yes, this is exactly how I wanted this film to feel like, to be like, to look like. So I have to mention the moment in which Han and Chewie finally meet. It's a beautiful moment. It felt natural. It felt organic. It didn't feel forced. I loved how it played out, and yeah, I was really happy in that because it's one of those moments in the movie that you know is going to happen, but it's like, how are they going to do it? Is it going to feel cheap? Is it going to feel forced? But it didn't. It was great, and I loved it. So yeah, I think they did a really good job at capturing the chemistry between these two characters, Solo and Chewbacca. They nailed it. It's exactly how you would expect. So yeah, overall, I really liked Solo. I really enjoyed it. I had a lot of fun with it. Some really cool action scenes, especially the train scene, which is in all the trailers. I loved how that scene played out. It was thrilling. I loved the music that accompanied it. And it just kept escalating. It was one of those action scenes that just kept getting wilder and wilder and more fun and more intense. And yeah, I loved it. I had a big smile on my face. Just loved how that entire scene played out, as well as being very nostalgic, because that train reminded me of the train in one of the levels, Junkyard level, I think, in Shadows of the Empire. One of my favourite Star Wars games, and one of my favourite stories, in fact. If you haven't read Shadows of the Empire, read it. But that train reminded me of that game, so that was very nostalgic for me. So I'm sort of going to delve into the negatives now, because there are negatives. This is not a perfect movie. And I did have slight issues with the film. But overall, I really liked it. But one of my issues was I really wanted them, the writers, the director, to give us a reason to why we needed this film. And coming out after the movie, even though I enjoyed it, I enjoyed the ride, it felt like I wanted it to. It was everything that I wanted it to feel and look like. I came out thinking, did we really need it? The film didn't really give itself a purpose or a reason for it to exist, other than tell us sort of what we already knew happened. So it tells us how Han met Chewie. We knew that moment was coming. Fair enough. We got it. It was great. There are moments in this film that you know is going to happen because you've heard of it. Like the Kessel Run, for example. So, okay, fair enough. Great, let's see it. But we need more of a reason and more of a purpose to why we're going to have this movie, a Solo film. And they really, for me, they really needed to delve more into the character Solo. I wanted to find out what makes Solo tick. Why is Solo like he is? You know, why does Solo do what he does? Why does he act like this? I wanted them to really rip into that character. And I wanted them to explore the Solo character. That, for me, would have given this film more depth and more meaning. But they didn't. It was more of sort of like a join the dots sort of, we're just going to show you all these famous events that you've heard of in the original movies, and we're going to make it fun. We're going to put some really fun, crazy action scenes in between it all. And that's how it just felt. That's how it felt. So overall, it sort of felt like I just needed more from it. And it's not just the character Solo, it's the other characters as well. I sort of wanted them to develop them a little bit more, give them a little bit more depth, and some more screen time for certain characters as well. So yeah, when it comes to the characters, mainly Solo, I just wanted there to be more depth and more, you know, delving into those characters. As fun and as enjoyable the movie was, I felt like the film lacked high stakes as well. It needed a little bit more It needed more humanity. For me, this film just needed a little bit more humanity, more focus on the characters, and then I think I would have felt a little bit more satisfied after coming out from the film. As satisfied as I already was, I would have felt like, yes, do you know what, we really needed that. There was more of a meaning behind it. There was more of a purpose behind it. Unfortunately, I didn't end up feeling like that. It was just 2 hours of fun and nostalgia, and it was exciting. And it was a well-crafted movie. It felt like it needed more emotion as well. There were moments which required emotion, and it sort of lacked that punch, that emotional clout that these certain moments needed. And that's all down to the lack of focus on the characters and exploring these characters. And I do feel like some characters were left a little bit underdeveloped. Also, I got to mention that they I don't really know why they did this, but they sort of explain, or they show you how Solo got his name, Solo. And that's the one moment in the movie which I really, really didn't like. And I was like, did we really need that? And we didn't. We didn't at all. And I was like, it felt a little bit lazy, actually, when Solo is given his actual name, Solo. It felt very lazy, and I didn't like it. That's probably, for me, it was one of the biggest negatives. It was like, oh, really? So yeah, I think if you're a hardcore Star Wars fan, you are really going to enjoy this film, because it really aims for nostalgia. And for me, it sort of really aimed for those people that are growing up watching these movies. And it transports you back to being a child again, watching that original trilogy. So I felt like Ron Howard captured that feel and that look very, very well. And I feel like this film aims for the people, the Star Wars fans that have watched the Clone Wars TV show and Rebels and have read the comics and have read the books. It really sort of caters for those fans, and I'm one of those fans, actually. I adore the Clone Wars TV show and Rebels, and there were a lot of references to those in this movie, a hell of a lot more than I thought there was going to be. I think those that are hardcore Star Wars fans that are really up to date with the expanded universe are going to get a lot from this movie, a lot more than your sort of casual moviegoer, you could say, your casual viewer. And we do get that really cool cameo at the end, which for me all made sense. But I do feel like there are going to be people out there that haven't watched the Clone Wars, for example, and I'm going to be going like, oh, how did that happen? In regards to the cameo. But yeah. So yeah, I really like Solo, Star Wars film, and considering all the trouble that went on behind the scenes, I can't wait to go and see it a second time. It's a well-crafted movie. I think Ron Howard did a really good job at capturing that original Star Wars trilogy feel and look. My only issue was they didn't really capture Solo. They needed to be more. They needed to be more focused on the character Solo and explore the character more. It felt very breezy, and sort of like, we're just going to show you the key moments and, you know, give you some really fun and exciting action scenes in between all of those moments, and which they were. It was, you know, the action scenes in this movie were great. The way they played out, they were so fluid in which the way they played out. They were a lot of fun, but they needed to really focus on the character Solo more and give us more of a reason to why we needed this film. There needed to be higher stakes. There needed to be more depth and more of a meaning. But overall, I thought this was a very well crafted movie, and it played on nostalgia for me. I'm not sure what you guys think, but yeah, I really liked it, and like I said, can't wait to go and see it a second time. They are my thoughts and opinions of Solo, a Star Wars story, and I will be giving Solo, a Star Wars story, a B. What did you guys think of Solo? Let me know below. I would love to know. And again, thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. And remember, if you like what you see and you want to see future reviews by me, then don't forget to hit subscribe.